the gymnasium was full of noise and color. Bright banners hung from the ceiling. Long tables were draped in white cloth. Parents in expensive clothes moved through the room like they owned every inch of it. It was Maplewood Elementary's annual fundraiser night. And in the far corner, near the back wall, stood a man who looked like he did not belong. His name was Daniel Mercer. He wore a plain flannel shirt. His boots were scuffed. His jacket had a small tear near the left shoulder that he had tried to hide with, as he stood. He was holding a paper cup of punch he had not touched. Around him, polished couples laughed loudly and compared vacation homes. They glanced at him once, then twice, then leaned into each other and whispered. He noticed. He always noticed. But he said nothing. He just shifted his weight and looked toward the door where his daughter was helping with the welcome table. He was there for her, only for her. Then the main doors swung open, and a man in full military dress uniform walked in. The room went quiet, and the general's eyes found Daniel immediately. What happens next will leave you speechless. Keep listening. Daniel had been waking up at 4:47 every morning for 3 years, not because of an alarm, because of habit, because of training. Because some parts of a man never fully leave him, no matter how far he tries to walk away from them. He would rise in the dark, move quietly through the small house, and start the coffee. Then he would pack a lunch for his daughter Emma. A sandwich cut into triangles because she liked triangles. An apple, a small note tucked inside the bag with a drawing of a star, every single morning. Without fail, by 6:15, he was dropping her at school. By 7:00, he was at his first job, a maintenance position at a mid-sized office building downtown. He fixed things, leaking pipes, broken hinges, burned out lights, work that made his hands rough and his back ache. By noon, by 2, he picked Emma up. By 4, he was at his second job. Evening shifts at a hardware store 3 blocks from their house. He came home after 9. Checked on Emma, who was always asleep by then. Sat at the kitchen table for exactly 15 minutes, with whatever was left of the day. Then went to bed. And did it all again. The neighbors on Clover Street saw a quiet man who kept to himself, a man who mowed his lawn on Saturdays and waved politely but never stopped to talk long. Some assumed he was antisocial, some assumed he was struggling, some assumed the worst. None of them asked, and Daniel never offered. There was a version of his life he had packed away like old equipment, sealed, stored, never opened in front of anyone, especially not in front of Emma. She deserved a father who was present. Steady, safe, not one haunted by everything he had seen and done and lost. If this story is already hitting close to home, drop a comment below. You are not alone in carrying something heavy in silence. There was a photograph Daniel kept in the bottom drawer of his nightstand. He never displayed it. Never talked about it. But he never threw it away either. In the photograph, he was younger. Sharper. Standing tall in full uniform beside 4 other soldiers. All of them were grinning at the camera like they had just conquered something impossible, because they had. Daniel Mercer had enlisted at 19, not because he had no other options, but because he believed in something bigger than himself. He believed in service. In protection. In standing between danger and the people who could not stand there themselves. He rose quickly through the ranks. His commanding officers called him precise. Calm under pressure. The kind of man who made decisions in seconds that other men took days to make. By 26, he was leading his own unit in operations that never made the news. Missions that existed only in classified files and in the memories of the men who survived them. And then there was the mission that changed everything. He never said the name of the place out loud, not anymore. But he could still feel the heat of it. Still hear the sounds. Still see the moment when everything that was supposed to go right went completely wrong. His unit was ambushed. Daniel made a call. A fast, impossible call that saved the lives of everyone under his command. But it cost him something he could never get back. When he came home, he was different. Quieter, like something behind his eyes had been turned down low and never fully came back on. And then Sarah got sick. Sarah, Emma's mother. The woman who had written him letters every week during deployment, who had kept every single one of his return letters in a shoebox under their bed, The diagnosis came fast. The decline came faster. 18 months after he left the service, Sarah was gone. Emma was 4 years old. Daniel stood at the graveside with his daughter's small hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers. And he made a silent promise to the woman in the ground and to the child beside him. He would not fall apart, he would not disappear into grief, he would show up. Every day. For Emma and he had kept that promise without wavering for 3 years. But keeping a promise and healing from the inside were 2 very different things. Daniel knew that better than anyone. He just did not know how to do both at the same time. That kind of silent strength is rare. If you know someone carrying this kind of weight, share this story with them. They need to hear it. The general's name was Raymond Cole. He was 61 years old. Broad-shouldered, silver-haired. The kind of man whose presence changed the temperature of a room the moment he walked into it. He had driven 2 hours to be at Maplewood Elementary that evening, not for the fundraiser. For Daniel General, Cole moved through the crowd with quiet authority. Parents stepped aside without fully understanding why. Conversations dropped to murmurs. Even the school principal, mid-sentence with a donor, lost her train of thought. Cole's eyes did not leave Daniel. Daniel saw him coming. And for the first time in 3 years, the careful stillness he wore like armor began to crack. He straightened. Not from habit. From something deeper, something trained into his bones long before he ever became a father or a maintenance worker or the quiet man on Clover Street. Cole stopped directly in front of him. The room was watching now. Every polished parent, every teacher, every person who had whispered behind their hand less than an hour ago. Cole looked at Daniel for a long moment, then he raised his hand, slow, deliberate, formal, a full military salute. The room went absolutely silent. Not a cup moved, not a child laughed, not a single heel clicked against the gymnasium floor. Cole's voice was steady and clear and loud enough for every person in that room to hear. "Captain Daniel Mercer," he said, "on behalf of a grateful nation and every soldier whose life you saved on the night of March 14th, it is my honor to stand in front of you." A woman near the dessert table pressed her hand to her mouth. A man in a pressed suit slowly lowered his champagne glass. The school principal had gone completely still. And Daniel stood with his jaw tight and his eyes glassy and his hands rigid at his sides. He did not want this, not here. Not in front of all these people, not in the same room where Emma was standing frozen near the welcome table, staring at her father like she was seeing him for the very first time. Because she was 7 years old and she had never once heard the word captain used before her father's name. And now the entire room had heard it. Right now, somewhere, someone is hiding the most important parts of themselves to protect the people they love. If that hits you, hit the like button. This story is for them. Emma Mercer was 7 years old, and very good at reading rooms. She had learned this skill early. The way children of quiet parents often do. She could tell when her father was tired versus when he was sad. She knew the difference between his thinking silence and his hurting silence. She noticed when he skipped his 15 minutes at the kitchen table and just went straight to bed. She noticed everything, but she had never seen him look like this. He was standing so still. Like a statue of himself. His eyes were shiny in a way she had never seen before. His hands, those big rough hands that cut her sandwiches into triangles every morning, were trembling slightly at his sides. Emma took one step away from the welcome table, then another. The crowd around her father was shifting. Some people were leaning in. Some were stepping back. A woman she recognized as Tyler's mom was wiping her eyes. A man she had seen arguing loudly about parking spots outside the school was standing with his mouth slightly open, looking at her dad like he owed him something. Emma did not fully understand what the general had said. She understood captain. She had seen that word in her history books. She understood saved and honor and grateful nation. But what she could not understand was why her father looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. She pushed gently through the small crowd until she was standing beside him. She did not say anything. She just slipped her small hand into his. Daniel looked down at her immediately. The way he always did, like checking that she was still there, was the most important thing he could do in any given moment. His expression broke open just slightly, just enough for Emma to see what was underneath. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back, hard. Like she was the only solid thing in the room. Later that night, after General Cole had shaken Daniel's hand and spoken quietly with him in the corner for 20 minutes, after the crowd had slowly returned to their conversations with a new and heavy kind of awareness, after Emma had eaten 2 cookies and pretended everything was fine, she asked him in the car on the way home, "Daddy, what happened on March 14th?" Daniel gripped the steering wheel and did not answer for a very long time. That question. In that small voice. From the one person he had been protecting all along. Tell me in the comments, what do you think he said to her? The next morning, Clover Street felt different, or maybe Daniel was the one who felt different. He could not quite tell which. He did his usual routine. Coffee, at 4:47, sandwich cut into triangles, apple, small note with a star. But his hands moved slower than usual. His mind kept drifting back to the gymnasium, to the silence, to all those faces turning toward him like sunflowers suddenly finding light. He did not like it. Recognition had never been something he sought. In the service, the best missions were the ones nobody ever heard about. The best soldiers were the ones who did the work and walked away, clean. Daniel had lived by that code for so long, that public acknowledgement felt less like an honor and more like an exposure, like being turned inside out in front of strangers. He dropped Emma at school at 6:15 as usual. But this time, 3 parents who had never once made eye contact with him stopped to speak. The first was a woman named Linda. Blonde, always wore tennis whites. She had been one of the loudest laughers the night before. She approached him with a careful smile and said she had no idea. That she was sorry. That he was so brave. Daniel nodded once, thanked her quietly, and got back in his truck. The second was a man named Greg. Broad, loud, the parking spot arguer. He stuck out his hand and shook Daniel's with both of his own, and said his brother had served and he had nothing but respect. Daniel nodded again, and got back in his truck. The third was different. She was standing near the school gate, slightly itcher from the other parents. Her name was Claire. Daniel knew her only as the woman who sometimes left a spare umbrella on her porch for whoever needed it on rainy mornings. She had a son in Emma's class. She was quiet in the way Daniel understood, not unfriendly, just careful. She did not offer a speech. She just looked at him and said simply, "I'm glad you came home." 4 words, and somehow those 4 words did what 3 years of silence and survival had never managed to do. They cracked something open in the center of his chest. He sat in his truck for 6 minutes before he could drive away. Sometimes 4 words can undo years of silence. If this moment got to you, subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. They matter. That evening, Daniel did not go to his second job. He called the hardware store for the first time in 3 years, and asked for the night off. His manager said yes without asking questions. Maybe he had heard. News traveled fast in a town like Maplewood. Daniel went home. He cooked dinner himself. Nothing complicated. Pasta with butter and salt. The way Emma liked it. He set the table with 2 plates instead of 1 for the first time in longer than he could remember. Usually he stood at the counter and ate quickly while she sat at the table and told him about her day. Tonight he sat across from her. Emma noticed. She looked at him carefully the way she always did when she was trying to read him. But she did not push. She just talked about school. About a project on ocean animals. About how her friend Sophia had let her hold the class hamster during reading time. Daniel listens to every word. He let her voice fill the small kitchen. He let himself be present in a way he had not allowed himself to be in a very long time. Not since Sarah. Not since he had decided that surviving and living were 2 different things, and he only had energy for one. After dinner, Emma helped him wash the dishes. She stood on her step stool and rinsed while he dried. They worked in comfortable silence. The kind that does not need to be filled. Then Emma handed him the last plate. She stepped down from the stool, and she stood in the middle of the kitchen facing him. She straightened her back the way she had seen him do in the gymnasium. She lifted her small chin, and she raised her right hand to her temple in a careful and slightly crooked salute. "Thank you for saving those soldiers, Daddy," she said quietly. "And thank you for coming home to me." Daniel stared at his daughter, this small girl who had never once complained about his long hours. Who had never asked why he did not go to school events like other parents, who had never pushed him for answers he was not ready to give. This child who had given him the only reason he had to keep breathing on the hardest mornings. He knelt down in front of her. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel Mercer let himself cry. Not the quiet kind, not the kind he swallowed in the dark after checking on her. The real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere so deep inside a person, that when it finally breaks loose it takes everything with it. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. He held her like she was the only solid thing left in the world. Because in many ways she was. The general's salute had been an honor. But this one, this small imperfect salute, from a 7-year-old girl who finally understood who her father really was. This was the only recognition Daniel Mercer had ever needed. He had spent 3 years trying to protect Emma from the truth of who he was. And in the end, it was the truth that finally set them both free. Every parent carries something their children do not see yet, and every child will one day look at their parent and finally understand the weight they carried in silence. If this story moved you, leave a comment with one word that describes how you feel right now, and subscribe so these stories keep finding you. Because some stories are not just stories. They are the moments we have been too scared to say out loud.